Hello, and welcome to the most mediocre podcast on the planet. I'm Chris, and this is Average Joe. Let's talk about it. Welcome to a place where you can feel comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations and say the things out loud that we normally don't talk about. So sit back, get comfortable, and let's talk about it.
This one's a little bit personal for me, but I'm willing to share. So let's get right to it. I left my home when I was between the ages of 16 and 17. I can't even remember for sure the exact age. I just know that I was still in high school and I probably completed only one full year, and I believe it was my sophomore year if memory serves. But I didn't leave because I thought I had it all figured out. I left because the situation warranted my vacating the circumstances. And that's a very nice way to put it. But in this episode, I want to touch on how we handle things when we're younger as opposed to looking back on them years later and understanding why we did what we did. Did we do the right thing? And, accepting the challenge of questioning yourself. Was it for selfish reasons, or was it because I was destined for something better than the life that I was living? Welcome to Average Joe. Let's talk about it. And these are the things that we will continue to talk about, but I want to get into how my life changed over a short period of time by one decision that I made to leave the home. Now, it wasn't about instability or, wondering, hey, am I going to get the care that I need from my family or anything like that. Inside, I was fighting with myself on whether or not I could continue to live in the environment that I was living in. And it created a mindset in me as I grew older and saw the world around me, so to speak, as I, my formative years, becoming a teenager, seeing the lives that other kids around me were living, and getting, caught up in comparison mode. One thing I can say for certain is I feel in my heart of hearts that I made the right choice. And considering where I'm at today, I'm almost certain of it. But you can never be 100% certain of anything. But I'll take you through the ebbs and flows of all the way to the point where I made it to the military. So what you don't realize is when you go out on your own and you're challenging yourself to get away from something that you feel is detrimental to your well-being, you also have to understand that there are going to be challenges in order for you to be able to survive away from the stability that you had, even though the environment might have been one that wasn't suitable. But it's one of those things where you've got to really weigh it out on a decision that is going to change your life, and whether or not is it going to be for the better. And like I said before, I didn't have it figured out, so I had no idea. And everything that came after, I was playing it by ear. I was just trying to survive. And make no mistake, I didn't leave because I was brave. I left because I didn't think I had another option. So some of the things that I can say that I built upon as I was out there in survival mode was, and building on, independence. Something that I kind of grew up with anyway, because as a latchkey kid, as a Generation X kid, somebody whose parents worked full time, and we basically, took care of ourselves, that kind of came naturally. So leaving the house and striking out on my own at such a young age wasn't wasn't really daunting on the face of things. You don't realize what's happening until after the fact, and then the impacts later on build up as you move through life. So it's really hard to calculate beforehand. What impact is this decision going to make, especially at the age that I was when I left. I mean, my brain wasn't even fully developed. I didn't have enough foresight to think about the future. I wasn't thinking about the future. I was thinking about right now. How is life affecting me right now, and how can I remove myself from this situation? There's a couple other habits that you build along the way, and things like work ethic, resilience, being able to bounce back from tumultuous situations that you might find yourselves in. The comfort of being uncomfortable, because it becomes the norm. You have to rely on yourself, so self-reliance is there. But then there are blind spots, right? You're going to have trust issues. You have to protect yourself. You create a shell around you when you become self-reliant and independent in that way, and you're out there and you're living on the streets and you're trying to find your way, and you think that's the only way that you're going to make it. A dirty mattress in the middle of the desert, or a hard concrete, pavement under a bridge, those types of things become comfortable after a while. You have to work past that. And I found myself in those situations. Now, granted, I wasn't always in the worst circumstances. I surrounded myself with a amazing group of friends that would take me in, that would sneak me into their homes, that would, their parents were gracious enough to have me for a little bit, in some cases for a long bit, depending on how quickly or how slowly I wore out my welcome. And God knows, I was a teenager, and there was only a couple things that I cared about at the time. Like, once again, small brain, not thinking about the future. But I was always given a pass, and I was lucky enough to, in between those horrible circumstances where I found myself outside as opposed to under someone's roof. They had no idea they were doing it, but they helped me in ways that I could never thank them for. And hopefully one day, maybe they'll hear this, or somehow it's conveyed to them. But they definitely made a huge impact on my life, just being there when certain people weren't. But going back to these habits, that's the type of thing that is going to keep you alive at 16. But it's also the type of thing that will isolate you later on in life, whether it be with your own kids, your own family, your friends. It can turn 180 out, and you just got to be aware of when it's happening. Otherwise, you're going to be 30, 40, 50 years old, and these habits that you created for yourself to build that wall, to thicken that shell, so to speak, are not going to be the best patterns of behavior to help you through life later on. But if you identify them beforehand, and be accountable for that, right? And don't look back and say, well, it's because of this, then you're a better person for it. Now, in times, I forgot my path, and I went a little astray, and I think we all did at some point in time, where we thought drinking and doing drugs and staying out all hours of the night, and among other things that I won't mention, the streets could lead to a cold, damp jail cell, or the back of a police car, or your face bloodied in the dirt. Those things, they happen because you put yourself in the wrong situations. And when you're out there and you're not thinking about your future, and you're only in the moment, that's going to happen. But I equate that to growing up, right? So my path to where I am today, it took me through certain stages of my life, which was, one was leaving the home at an early age, and then, learning what it was like to have to live on the streets, to have to wear the same clothes over and over again, to, not to be able to get to, clean yourself up after so many days, not to expect a meal, 2-3 times a day, to be able to walk into the pantry and grab a snack, or, to have a home cooked meal or a hot shower or something like that. But I remember at the time, that didn't bother me. I didn't think about those things. It was nice to have. And, looking back on it now, and having been in the military and seen third world countries, there are people who live like that every day. So when I think about those times, it just grounds me a little bit more, and it helps me to strengthen the roots that I have to be more empathetic to people that live in those situations constantly. The next stage was finding a job. I couldn't sustain my life by living off of others and living at other people's houses and jumping from couch to couch, so to speak, because that wasn't a way to live. It wasn't good for my psyche. It wasn't good for my health, and it was having a huge effect on how I was being molded into a person. Now, I can't say it was negatively or positively impacting me. I feel like there was a little bit of both, but having that experience, I feel, regardless if it was negative or positive, the impact itself has created an experience in me where if somebody asked me a question, if I had a chance to go back and do anything over again, I tell them over and over again, never, not for $1 million. I would not be the person I am today if it wasn't for the path that I have taken up to this point. It was meant to happen, and here I am because of it. So I ended up getting a job, bussing tables, doing, mostly restaurant work. I had some friends that, got me into, the back end of the pizza business. I went from there, and then I started, getting into the larger restaurants and, eventually waiting tables. And I did this from, 16, 17, 18 years old. But I still wasn't getting anywhere. And I found myself eventually inside a place instead of outside of it, as far as living conditions are concerned. But it wasn't my own, and it didn't feel like that there was a future to be had as of that moment. I found myself on the floor of a friend's studio apartment, and I was paying him whatever I could just in order to stay there. Luckily, working at a restaurant, I didn't have to worry about where my next meal was, but Mexican food can get real old real quick if you're eating it every day. But to this day, I love it. Can't get enough of it. So go figure. But in any case, that's where I met my wife. I was staying the night at somebody else's house after a long night of partying, and one thing just kind of led to another. But she, for whatever reason, saw something in me that I don't think anybody, including myself, saw in me. And I think that was the beginning to the end of me not knowing what my future looked like, because I got a glimpse of what my future could be, and she helped me understand what potential that I did have by believing in me. And it shaped me to become somebody that wanted to be better for her and her little boy. And I think that had a lot to do with joining the military. I saw a better life. I saw a life that I could have could definitely have used from the beginning. It was a little late in life that I got there. I believe I was 22, or no, actually I was 20 when I met her. I joined the military when I was 22. I didn't have a high school diploma. I believe I had my GED, and at the time, the Navy wasn't taking GED, so I had to go to continuation school. And luckily, the age that that you can't exceed in order to get your high school diploma is 22, and I just made the cutoff. It didn't take me long. I think it took me 6 or 7 months, but it was part of the process in order for me to get in and really change my life and their lives for the better. But I definitely would not have had any direction without somebody believing in me the way that she did and the way that she still does. I can't say that, hey, the military saved me, even though, the structure felt good, the rules felt stabilizing, there were clear expectations. I had a place to sleep. I always had something to eat. She gave me all that anyway before I got there, but there was more. And so, I bought into it. But the thought of it, the military saved me. It definitely gave me direction, but I could say beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was my wife that saved me. So the only thing, though, that I will say that that's tough about being out on your own, and then coupling that with joining the military and being in the military for as long as I was, and being deployed time and time again, and some of those bad habits, some of those things that you have to unlearn, they kind of melded together, and they compounded because there is that isolation at times, there is that self-reliance, there are those things that I was learning when I was homeless and on the streets that I also had to learn while I was in the military. It's those things that they teach you. Of course, they're taught in a more positive fashion. I mean, there's certain expectations, and if you can't be self-reliant, and if you can't be, assured and confident, almost to the point of being arrogant, then you won't make it. Right? You can get eaten alive. But letting people help, was always an issue. And in some cases, it still kind of is. I like to do things on my own. I like to figure things out on my own. I'd rather be the one helping others than have somebody help me. I think that's a control thing. And I think that comes from, having been out there doing it on my own, and then, moving into, that military life. I've had to learn not to assume the worst. That's a hard one too, because, the expectations that you have of others, if you're let down in the beginning of your life, I think that you just expect to continually be let down, and that's not the way to live. I think that everybody should be given a chance. Everything should be given a chance, but it's tough. And that's another thing I had to unlearn, was not assuming the worst. Slowing down, I still don't know how to do that. They say when the sharks stop swimming, they die or they drown. I'm not sure what the correct saying is, but you get the idea. And I'm always afraid that if I stop moving, that something bad's gonna happen. So, and believe me, when I was out there, before I met my wife, before I had a place to live, before I got in the military, I was always wondering what was going to happen next. Where do I need to be? I can't be in the same place all the time. I have to always be moving. And I don't. I have to say out loud. In fact, I heard myself say it to myself today. Stop. Take a breath. Sit. You don't have to do this. And I actually sat in my chair for, a good 2 minutes. Hands in my lap. And just waiting. I shouldn't even been waiting. I shouldn't be waiting on nothing. I should just be. And it's such a tough thing to do, because I feel like something's always got to be happening. But that's not true, because I'm not living in a fight or flight mode. I'm in charge of my own destiny. I have people who rely on me. I've got, kids, family who rely on me. I got employees that rely on me. I got all these things that are going on. But I got to understand that and allow myself to feel good about where I'm at and satisfied with the job that I'm doing, without beating myself up and saying, hurry up, get this done, and putting all this pressure on me to, make sure everybody's good in my traffic pattern. I need to step outside of it from time to time and realize that, hey, I can't take care of anyone if I'm not taking care of myself. I think the biggest thing I learned out of all that is, you can survive something and still not want to live that way forever. And that's just, that's the kind of perspective that you need when you come out of those kinds of situations. Now, what would I tell my 16-year-old self? I'm 50 now, and if I could go back in time and find my ass somewhere walking home from school, weeks before I, made that final decision, I think I would just keep it simple and not overcomplicate my tiny little 16-year-old brain and just say, you're not broken. You're not behind. You're not weak for wanting to leave. And you won't always feel this way. So anybody that's ever grown up in a situation where you were contemplating doing something drastic, and it's not a dramatization like, you see in the movies. This was a conversation that I was having in my head for a long time, and it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction to the situation because it was something that had built up in me. And when you realize that, it's not a reckless endeavor, but you got to get to the point where you're building off of something. And in the beginning, I wasn't. So you have to be able to strive for something if you do decide to make that decision. And I wouldn't tell my 16-year-old self not to do something like that. I would just kind of break it down and, let me understand what a difference my life will be once that decision is made if I don't ever decide to go back. And believe me, I had several opportunities. I was brought back to my house a couple times from my mom picking me up on the side of the road because I got in trouble with the police, or I was trespassing or something crazy like that. But there was a couple times, let's just put it that way. And both times, it didn't work out where I was staying. It wasn't in the cards. And I'm okay with that. I never looked back. So when I talk about, hey, is there anything that I regret about anything that's happened in my life? Regardless how negative it was, there's really nothing I can think of when it comes to me. Now, if a decision that I've made in my lifetime impacted somebody else, I definitely regret that. But how it has shaped me, how it has put me on the path to be the person that I have eventually become and who I am becoming, then no, I don't regret it. And, I guess there's a couple of perspectives on that particular statement, considering that, if I hurt somebody, or if, I did something or made a decision, or, there was some kind of action that I took that hurt somebody, or some detractor, some negative impact. Life happens, and you can't grow without those times in your lives where there's a set of circumstances that create the struggle that almost feels like you will never climb out of that hole that you may or may not have made yourself. The important thing to take away from it all is that you're honest about why you made the decision. You see a positive impact somewhere along the way. You make amends with that decision, and you thank the people that helped you get to where you're at through those times, and then you carry on. So I've hoped that, you understand, at least have some context now of the type of person that I am and why some of the content in these podcasts are a little bit, I wouldn't say 100% serious, but I think they're insightful. And I think that's the best way to kind of, convey that message is that, none of us are broken. We have made decisions in our lives that have impacted others, including ourselves. And, however you want to spin that, make things right. Make things right with you first. And then at some point, if there is amends to be made, then make them. But to sum it up, I didn't leave home to become something. I left because I didn't know how to stay. And for a long time, survival felt enough. Survival isn't the same thing as direction. And I've heard it before. Do you want to survive or do you want to thrive? I needed direction. Meeting my wife didn't magically fix anything. She just believed I could be more than what I was living at the time. And the military didn't save me. It gave me structure. But she gave me a reason to want it. And that's the difference. You can survive something and still not want to live that way forever. I said that before. And if you grew up fast, if you learned survival early, if you built strength out of instability, you're definitely not broken. You're just like the rest of us. We grew up in a time where we took care of ourselves, but you might still have things to unlearn. I know I do, and that's okay. We'll keep talking about it, and we'll see you, we'll hear you, and we'll understand you in the next episode of Average Joe. Let's talk about it. Stay safe and be all in, always.
Hey, thanks for showing up today. And for any of us that are out there carrying more than we like to say out loud, let's keep the conversation going on the next episode.